The Climate Action Reserve is the most experienced and trusted offset registry to serve the carbon markets. As more organizations look to combat climate change and support environmental projects with true integrity, they turn to the reserve to foster real solutions and reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. We are excited to kick off the second series of Carbon Connection and feature external partners with insights and expertise in particular climate sectors and topics across the carbon market. I am your host, Lauren Napuk, and thank you for joining us. Hi, welcome to our next episode of Carbon Connection. Today, we are speaking with Amy Zell, who has been a leader in carbon markets since 2018, where she has worked on offset project development, strategic net zero advisory, and market intelligence. Her passion for balancing economic imperatives with environmental realities has led her to her current role as Technical Director, Voluntary Carbon Markets with the International Emissions Trading Association, or IETA. Today, we are speaking with Amy about the global expansion of the voluntary carbon market, specifically the efforts that have increased to ensure it is equipped to play a critical role in global mitigation efforts. Now, to kick things off, Amy, what are some reasons for the global expansion of the voluntary carbon market?
Well, I think there's quite a few, and the market as a whole has seen quite a bit of growth since 2017, 2018. And when you break this down, I think we can attribute that to both aspects on the demand side and the supply side. So on the demand side, a lot of corporates have realized that the voluntary carbon market is a very effective way of investing in emission reduction. A lot of these corporates have set CSR targets and goals that may be driven by their stakeholders, possibly by their investors, but this does seem to be playing an increased level of importance at many companies. And so where companies aren't able to decarbonize internally, say it's currently cost prohibitive or the technology is just not available, many of those corporates are turning to the voluntary carbon market to invest in emission reductions that others are making happen. So a lot of these corporates are seeing that markets are pretty effective. On the supply side as well, a lot of different market participants are figuring out that they want to reduce emissions. They want to contribute to global goals to support climate change. And the voluntary carbon market provides a funding mechanism for them. And so getting that finance to these projects is very effectively done through the voluntary carbon market, especially when we're looking at the flow of capital from global north to the global south. I would say the supply is also being influenced specifically by financial institutions who, again, are wanting to invest money in emission reductions, but they need to see a return on their investment. And so the increased interest from financial institutions is actually having some interesting impacts on supply in the market, as well as how these credits are traded, but they are able to see that return in the VCM.
Thank you so much, Amy. I really appreciate you highlighting these reasons for the global expansion of the voluntary carbon market and sharing these perspectives specifically from the demand and supply side. And coupled with these efforts has led to a variety of organizations launching to support this growth of the market, including the Integrity Council on the Voluntary Carbon Market, or ICVCM, the Voluntary Carbon Market Initiative, or VCMI, and the Carbon Credit Quality Initiative, CCQI, many acronyms in our field, among others. So I was hoping to gauge your own perspectives across these initiatives, starting with what is the Integrity Council on the Voluntary Carbon Market, or ICVCM, and what role does it play in the VCM?
Playing an important role. Starting with that, the ICVCM is an independent governance body for the supply side of the market. So they're looking to ensure high quality credits are making their way into the VCM and being purchased by buyers. So what the ICVCM is doing or has done is they've really set the bar for the quality of credits. So looking at carbon crediting programs such as the Climate Action Reserve and making sure that there's good governance and good processes in place to ensure that the credits going through those programs have a fundamental or foundational level of quality. And then the second level they're doing is a category level assessment. So they're looking at specific groupings of credits, such as industrial gases or cook stoves, for example. And they're trying to determine if, as a whole, those credits can be deemed high quality. So they have come out with what they're calling the core carbon principles, or the CCPs, another acronym because we love them in this market. And they're being applied again, both at the program level and the category level. So IETA members are very, I would say, cautiously optimistic that this is going to land well. There's a lot of interest in the ICVCM right now to figure out, will this be an effective bar to determine that level of quality? And depending on the scale they can achieve with the CCPs, I think it could be a very important benchmark for the voluntary carbon market.
Thank you so much, Amy. That's really helpful to understand the supply side of this puzzle, which the ICVCM is tackling. And flipping that, what is the Voluntary Carbon Market Integrity Initiative, and what role does that play in the voluntary carbon market?
Yeah, so VCMI, the Voluntary Carbon Market Integrity Initiative, is a multi-stakeholder platform aimed at promoting credible claims that buyers of credits can make. So while ICVCM is on the supply side looking at high quality credits, VCMI is on the demand side looking at high integrity claims. So VCMI set a very ambitious bar for corporate action. And the role that it's going to play in the market, to a degree, is still being figured out. They launched their claims code of practice, which would lay out foundational criteria and what corporates need to do in order to make a VCMI claim. So the role in the market, I would say, is still slightly unclear. Some research has suggested that the bar may be inaccessible for a lot of companies, and only a small percentage of companies currently buying credits would be able to make a VCMI claim. So there is still some work to be done. That said, VCMI launched this knowing that there would be additional modules to come out. So I am on the stakeholder forum along with a bunch of other market experts, and a few of the things that are being worked on right now include looking at different tiers. Could there be an on-ramp to get more companies able to make these claims or starting to make these claims with ramping up ambition? They're looking at the monitoring, reporting, and assurance framework, which will be required to guarantee high quality. It's a verification of the claim, if you will. And they're also evaluating potentially different names for the claims. As of right now, it's VCMI Silver, VCMI Gold, or VCMI Platinum, but they are looking at what those should be called and if those are accurately reflecting the claims being made. So ICVCM, they are linked. Actually, VCMI does say that only CCP labeled credits from ICVCM could be used to make these claims. And so there is a lot of overlap between those two initiatives, and they're both working very hard to sort of set that bar for quality and integrity in the market.
That's super exciting to hear, Amy, and I appreciate you making that connection between the two initiatives and how with the ICBCM, we're looking at supply side, VCMI, we're looking at the demand side, but we know that these two initiatives are working together, looking together at a more transparent and accessible carbon market on the voluntary side. So that's really great to hear. And then lastly, would you be able to explore a little bit what the Carbon Credit Quality Initiative, or CCQI, is and what role this plays in the voluntary carbon market?
Absolutely. So CCQI is an initiative to provide free and transparent information on the quality of credits. So similar concept to the Integrity Council in that it's looking at the supply side of credits. But I would say this initiative is focused very specifically on helping buyers determine what they're purchasing. So CCQI does this. They have a framework whereby buyers can compare the quality of credits on 7 core criteria. And these are, again, foundational criteria that you hear over and over in the voluntary market. Things like additionality and robust quantification, ensuring the credit isn't counted twice or no double counting. They also look at ensuring the carbon credits or the projects are supporting the transition to net zero, which is very important since we're all working towards the Paris Agreement goals of net zero by 2050. And a couple other things CCQI is looking at is Good governance or strong institutional arrangements from the carbon crediting programs. Environmental and social impacts are positive and or mitigated if they're not, as well as considering the climate ambition of the host country where the emission reductions are taking place. So lots of good stuff coming out of CCQI. And again, it is an initiative aimed at buyers helping to determine the quality of the credits they're purchasing.
This is great, Amy. Thank you so much. It's really helpful to go through each one of these initiatives and help people understand what they're each trying to achieve within the voluntary carbon market and help to improve the efficiencies of these systems. So, dovetailing off that note, why is it important that these organizations and efforts exist across the voluntary carbon market?
The voluntary market, I would say, has struggled a little bit in the last year and a half. There's been some concern about a lack of trust about the quality of these credits, which is why we're seeing the words quality and integrity come up so frequently in these debates. But at IETA, we believe the antidote to a lack of trust is quality. And so these initiatives are really working to rebuild that trust in the voluntary market. ICVCM can step in and say, well, we've evaluated both the program and the category. We have a high degree of confidence that these credits provide a low risk, right? CCQI, we're having that tool to help companies understand what credits they're buying is again looking at that quality more on a project by project basis. Buyers also are concerned about repercussions in the media if they're making the wrong claim. Look, we've seen this, and it's unfortunate that companies are having their reputations damaged when they're trying to do the right thing and purchasing voluntary credits. But we do need a level of assurance that the claims they're making are robust and that they're fair and that they're accurate. And that's where an initiative like VCMI comes in, looking at that claim side of things. I would say all of these initiatives are working towards getting rid of the G word or greenwashing. No company wants to be accused of that. And so if there's a common understanding in the market between these initiatives and others that are happening in the background, that should give buyers a level of assurance that they won't be accused of greenwashing. I think now might be a good time to bring up ICROA as well. It's an initiative that I work on at AIDA that I do want to highlight in this conversation. ICROA is the International Carbon Reduction Offsetting Accreditation, and it's a voluntary initiative housed within AIDA aimed at providing an accreditation to intermediaries in the voluntary market. So again, ICVCM, supply of credits, VCMI, buyers and their claims. What ICROA aims to do is recognize high quality project developers, retailers and brokers, or those who are transacting credits to give assurance to buyers that they're meeting a certain threshold of standard or that they're meeting a certain threshold of integrity. And so ICROA is important to the market because we really need that trust to be rebuilt at all levels. And so ICROA's accreditation program being aimed at the intermediaries is an important way to add additional assurance to those who want to participate in the market.
That's really exciting. I am really happy that you raised ICROA. It's another important piece of this puzzle to ensuring that we have standardization across the voluntary carbon market and draw across all of the different stakeholders that are involved, looking at the buyers and sellers, but then with ICROA, looking at the project developers and retailers as well and ensuring that they're part of conversation. So that's great to hear. And across these initiatives, what are some challenges that they're facing to support credible market efforts?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question, Lauren. And again, we need to look at the landscape of the voluntary carbon market as a whole, because we have seen a depressed demand in the market late 2022 and sort of through 2023. So this is causing challenges for a whole spectrum of market participants, whether that's from negative press. There's been some articles questioning the quality or the integrity of specific projects and project types. There's also unclear definitions of quality and integrity. And so, again, that's what these initiatives are being born out of, is trying to solve that problem. We're seeing different legal definitions on the nature of carbon credits. Is it a commodity? Is it a financial asset? And this is impacting how governments are interacting with the market. I would also say There's some anticipation or speculation on how the voluntary carbon market will interact with Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. So there's a whole bunch of factors right now that are challenging the market. So the challenge is that the three initiatives we're talking about, ICVCM, VCMI, and CCQI, need to be considered in this landscape as well, even though as a whole they are aiming to, I would say, fix some of these concerns with the broader VCM. So a couple specific examples. ICVCM is currently, I would argue, facing challenges around uncertainty around which categories of credits are going to get the CCP label. A lot of market participants are very keen to see what categories will be fast tracked and have the labels issued in 2023. There's also potential questions on timeline for non fast tracked categories. What will it take for them to be CCP labeled? VCMI is facing some challenges, I would argue, with accessibility. Again, that research that shows only 4% of companies could make a VCMI silver claim. Well, that's concerning because we want this to be broadly adopted. We want consistency. And so looking at that, the stakeholder forum, they are taking that very seriously. I would say CCQI and ratings agencies in general are facing challenges, also inconsistent ratings. That's one thing I've heard a few buyers say they're concerned with. If the same project is getting a different rating across these platforms, well, what's going on there? And they certainly do have different methodologies, but it could dampen, I would say, buyer confidence in those ratings. So again, the market is continually evolving. These programs are working very hard to define that integrity, but we do seem to be in a bit of a reset period right now for the VCM. That said, there is cautious optimism, especially amongst IETA members, and we do believe that we can gain momentum with all of this emphasis on integrity to really bring the market where it needs to be to scale.
Thank you, Amy. That's really interesting to hear these perspectives. And also, I think important for people who are entering the voluntary carbon market to know these challenges before possibly working with any of these initiatives. So, thank you for that. And looking at the carbon market and the corporate landscape, would you say that there is a vested interest and support for these initiatives?
Yes, short answer on this one. I think it is. I think there's broadly across the DCM, market participants want to see the market succeed. And it's an interesting market in that it is a bottom up market, right? It was built because corporates want to invest in emission reductions voluntarily. I think the term is contrived market. It exists because it needs to exist. And so, yeah, your question, is there a vested interest and support in these initiatives? Absolutely. Because the market does need to have trust, meaning it does need to have integrity. And all of these initiatives are working very hard to ensure that.
Thank you so much. That's such a great note because, yes, there is vested interest. We want to build this trust. We want to build transparency in the market. Everybody on board, I think, is really trying to encourage more actors to enter around this trust and really build up confidence in the market, as you've noted. So that's really helpful to understand. And what can we expect in terms of standardization from the global voluntary carbon market over the next year or 5 years or entering the future? What does this landscape look like as we continue to move forward?
I think that's such a great question again, and one that we are looking at, we're thinking a lot about at IETA and at ICROA. One thing that we are anticipating in the next few years might be more government involvement in the voluntary market. So we are starting to see this with bills being proposed in California about disclosures that buyers and sellers of voluntary credits must make. But we haven't really seen a government impose requirements for voluntary disclosures before. So that's an interesting development. We're also seeing in Europe regulations being proposed to crack down on greenwashing claims and make sure that claims like carbon neutral or net zero mean something. So we are seeing more government interest in that. I'm also anticipating more government interest as the interplay between the voluntary carbon market and Article 6 of the Paris Agreement begin to be fleshed out and developed. If governments are looking to purchase voluntary credits, well, they're going to have more of a vested interest in, again, assuring the integrity and the quality of those credits, since at that point they're taking responsibility for it via their nationally determined contribution. So more government involvement is one thing that we're anticipating in the next few years. We're also anticipating more agreement, or maybe we're hoping for more agreement on what does good look like, right? We have all these initiatives trying to define quality and integrity. Can we come to a common understanding? The criteria that I mentioned earlier that CCQI is looking at, that's reflected in ICROA criteria, ICVCM criteria, CORSIA criteria, right? It's things like additionality, permanence, real, robust, measured emission reductions, no double counting, good governance. These things we all know need to happen. We're having very nuanced conversations about what does that exactly look like. And so I'm hoping that we can get more convergence and more agreement on what does good look like. I think the conversation on the legal nature of carbon credits is also very timely. And I suspect that's something that we're going to hear a lot about in the coming years, especially as more financial institutions get involved in these markets. They need to know the legal definition of carbon credits. And as governments get more involved in voluntary markets, they need to clearly define the legal nature of carbon credits. So that's one thing that I'm going to keep an eye on as well. One thing that I will say, Lauren, is that as we're trending in the right direction, figuring out what good looks like, figuring out how to govern and standardize this market, we want to make sure we're leaving room for innovation. Because the voluntary carbon market is so unique in how it was built. Again, bottom up through these innovators who wanted to quantify and read their emission reductions. I think that innovation is something that needs to be maintained, that nimbleness and that flexibility in these markets. So I'm hoping that as we go through and get more standardized, we don't neglect the innovation component.
Thank you so much, Amy. That is really inspiring. And I completely agree with you. We have to leave this room for innovation within the market, as it'll only enable it to grow in a more positive direction, allow more people to agree on some of these things that we're trying to explore across the voluntary carbon market, and leave room for innovation. I really like that. And Amy, before we close today, which thank you so much for your time already and all of the efforts that you're doing with IETA and ICROA. It's really exciting to see what's happening with the market right now. I wanted to see if there's any closing remarks or comments you might want to leave with the audience and myself.
We can't let perfect be the enemy of good. We've seen this quote, we've used this quote, we've heard this quote, but we can't let perfect be the enemy of good. Look, carbon credits are not perfect. We can acknowledge that. There's always going to be some level of risk with an investment like this. But carbon markets and the voluntary carbon market is still one of the best low-cost tools that we currently have in the toolkit to take globally a chance of meeting the Paris Agreement goals. So it's important that we are moving ahead with continuous improvement in mind, always trying to improve this market and the participants and the projects and the quality that's going on. We need to keep moving ahead. So never a dull moment in the VCM, but I am very optimistic about where we're going to land.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Amy. We are also optimistic here at the Reserve, and we're super excited to see this market continue to evolve moving forward. So I really appreciate your time today, Amy, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.